But I think there's massive confusion over all of these fancy words, and particularly around vaccine, around antibody treatment. We conflate bacterial and virus therapies on top of each other. How does a vaccine differ from the antibody treatment you announced yesterday?
Well, thanks for having me on, Tom. And exciting news last night with the emergency use authorization in the U.S. for our monoclonal antibody, neutralizing antibody, which is a therapy that you're to be given in this approval if you have newer onset disease, so a positive test and symptoms, and in particular if you fall into a high-risk group, you have underlying conditions or you're older. Then you can take this therapy, and in our studies it reduced the probability that you go to the hospital pretty dramatically by 70%. So that's an important step, another tool now to help manage this disease just when we need it most. In terms of how it works, you're asking, what we did actually was when your body's infected with a virus, it mounts a variety of immune responses. One of them is we create antibodies, which have been much talked about in these antibody testing. These antibodies lock up the virus and dispose of it. What we did was took antibodies from surviving patients early in the pandemic. We isolated the very most potent ones, in this case, and now we make it in a factory synthetically and give it as a medicine.
This is really important, David Ricks. Can you just suggest that this bacterial-like antibody therapy, almost like a bacterial antibiotic, could be a substitute for a true vaccine?
Well, we're studying what we call passive immunization in a setting where you're trying to prevent spread. In our case, we're looking at spread within nursing home facilities. It's similar to vaccination in a way. So when you get a vaccine, we introduce a killed or modified version of a part of a virus, and your body recognizes that as foreign and mounts its own antibody response. Here, what we're doing is we're giving you the antibody response of someone else prior to getting sick. It's in a study. It's not approved by the FDA, and we don't have the data yet. But that's a very interesting approach, and if we look at other viruses like Ebola even, this was the setting where these antibodies made the biggest difference. Of course, in the U.S. and I think around the world, nursing home patients, elderly in nursing homes, are at the highest risk. So this would be an important positive event if it occurred, and we should have that data in the coming weeks.
Dave, to build on what Tom's discussing, I think we're trying to ask the question as to whether we need a multi-pronged approach here, not just the advancement we heard from Pfizer yesterday, but maybe also complemented by what you're doing as well. One thing that stuck out for us all yesterday is just the storage of the mRNA vaccine that Pfizer are moving forward with and how difficult it is to store at really, really freezing cold temperatures. Dave, can you speak to that, the developments there on that side, and how difficult it will be actually to distribute something like that widely and everywhere?
Well, for the messenger RNA vaccines, they are fragile molecules, so they need to be held at a very, very low temperature. That will likely not, I don't think that's going to be a major barrier once this is broadly available in developed markets with advanced medical systems. Where it becomes a problem is where refrigeration and available capacities in developing countries is going to be much tougher and will take longer. That's why we have 2 of the leading 10 vaccines are using this technology. 8 aren't, and likely won't have those refrigeration restrictions. I suspect some of those will work as well. I'd bet on that. And we'll likely end up with multiple shots on goal with vaccines. In the meantime, none of them will work 100% of the time. And back to the original question, we'll still need medicines like our antibody therapy to help those that will still get sick, hopefully at a much lower rate as we approach something like herd immunity, but you'll still have endemic disease. And we'll need therapies. There's many examples where this is true, including common respiratory viruses like RSV, where we have both vaccination and antibodies. They can go together. But together, I mean, this is in the last 48 hours, we have 2 important developments in the fight against COVID-19. I think the future is looking more certain and brighter, for sure.
To build, though, on what John is talking about, there are some practical concerns as all of the pharmaceutical companies try to ramp up production. And I'm wondering, supply chain issues, especially as the pandemic worsens, the idea that all of these different pharmaceutical companies are trying to go for the same thing and probably sourcing some of the same substances, as well as using some of the same staffers. How well can you ramp up production of the antibody therapies to meet demand in the next couple of months?
Well, I wouldn't worry so much about that competition phase where we're competing our ideas. I think once it's clear there are winners, you'll see the industry come together to make product at scale. That's already occurred in the antibody space where Roche and Regeneron, who have a different approach from Lilly's, have teamed up. We've teamed up with Amgen and then also the largest contract manufacturing organizations in the world like Samsung and Fuji to build out that supply base. So I don't think we're wasting material by competing in that way. Of course, antibodies are complicated to make, one of the most complicated medicines we make, and we usually reserve them for severe disease like cancer and autoimmunity. Here we're talking about treating thousands, millions of people potentially with these antibodies. It will strain that system, and we will have scarcity, that's for sure. That's why the FDA, last night when they approved this, really asked doctors to use it in the highest risk patients. That's appropriate, so we use it where it matters most.
Dave, these are serious issues. We have about 30 seconds left, and I'd love for you to do me a favor on just a lighter note. Can you explain the offside rule to Tom Keene in about 20 seconds? Can you do that for us?
Please.
You're talking about in football. Yes, of course. So offsides is when the offensive player is in front of the defensive player prior to the ball being struck. Of course, once the ball's struck, he can run in front. It doesn't matter. That's different from hockey, where the blue line is what matters.
Oh, thank you. That's very
Textbook.
good. David Ricks there. And, of course, this
Dave,
is with the support of Eli Lilly to our Olympic Committee, which they've been committed to.
That's true.
John,
thank you for that. Yeah.
For many years. I still don't get, I think a blue line would solve it. You don't have to make it Manchester City blue. You could just make, like a nice Chelsea blue line, and it would work out, John.
There you go.
I think David Ricks and his kids would like that.
David Ricks gets it.